to Black Card Rehab, the show where we go from zero to black, one episode at a time. I am joined, as always, by my white friend Paige. Hey,
Hello.
Paige. Hi.
Hi.
On a scale of 0 to black, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling watching today's movie on a shared Netflix account. Ain't no reason we all got to pay for it.
That's right.
Yes. And Kristal, on a scale from 0 to African American, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling like some cotton draws.
But you know I don't wear no cotton draws.
So yes, I told you that I was gonna finally watch. I said I was gonna watch Dolemite, and you were like, which one? And I was like, well, if I have the strength, I'm gonna watch both.
Okay, did you watch both, or
did watch both.
You watched both. Okay.
Yes, I did watch. I watched Dolemite, and then I watched My Name is Dolemite. Dolemite is my name, actually, instead of backwards.
Yes. Which one did you watch first?
So I watched Dolemite first.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Because I knew that the other one, the newer one, the make of his life was going to be referencing a lot of things.
Yeah, I did appreciate that they put, for all the scenes that they show in Dolemite is my name, they show you the real scene at the end.
Yeah.
I did appreciate that.
And so I just wanted to make sure I was in on the joke, because I hate that feeling of like everybody, you just know you're missing something. So and I don't know, like after watching them this way, I still don't know if I don't know which one I would advise. Like if I were to say, oh, watch this one and this one, I still don't know which. Like I think you could really go either way. You're definitely going to have a different feeling about the older one if you watch the newer one first.
Yes. Yeah.
100%. Like I definitely was going through like revising my thoughts and feelings about it as I was watching the Eddie Murphie.
Right. Knowing the story behind it really kind of casts a different light on the original. 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure. So I watched Dolemite. I watched that on Tubi. Which I've mentioned, I think, once before, and I want to do this potentially as a live show one day. So Tubi is like an off-brand streaming service that you can get on either your phone or on Roku if you have it. But one of the things that Tubi has is a huge selection of Black movies.
Oh, right. Yes. You did mention this.
If from literally the absolute best to the absolute worst. And I would say like a good 80% of them I'd never heard of. And like, so one of the games that me and my boyfriend play from time to time is that we have to pick a movie from the Black cinema section. And then we first pick it based on like how bad the cover is and how bad the title is. I feel then like we watch 5 minutes of it.
I feel like the longer the title, the worse the movie.
That's true. We did watch something called Damages with Shamar Moore, and like it wasn't great, but the first 5 minutes, okay, like they were doing something.
Yeah, I love Shamar Moore also. But I feel like every time Tyler Perry tries to do a serious movie, it's like the temptation of the relationship of the person who lived in this house as a marriage counselor.
Right. That they got on sale during the downturn,
Now, how did you feel watching Dolemite after watching Black Dynamite last week?
Okay, yes. So let's just back up and let me just say, like, I was actually trying to remember when the first time I was even aware of Dolemite. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, the first time I would say I heard the word Dolemite was, of course, in Nothing But a G Thing.
Yes. Like in a grip, like my name was Dolemite. Yes.
Exactly. I'm curious, like, what was the first time you were aware of Dolemite as an entity?
I want to say that easily as like a teenager, I knew that it existed. Because definitely by the time I got to film school, I was already aware that it existed, even if I hadn't seen the films. And I want to say it would have probably been my dad referencing Dolemite. So when my dad was in college in like the late 70s, like 79 to 81, he had 2 black roommates. And so they would hang out and like watch movies and stuff. So I think he saw some of those movies with them.
Okay.
That's the only kind of contextualization I can come up with for why my dad had seen many of these movies. And so my dad loves Black Dynamite as well. And after we did our episode, he went back and watched it. And then he called me and was like, by the way, our Netflix queue is insane right now. He was like, you would not believe what they are recommending, which I find hysterical because I know the other things that my parents watch on Netflix. They're just like, oh, you watched Umbrella Academy? You must like Dolemite and the Black Ninjas. Like, it's just very, very funny to me. But so, yeah, I was aware that those kinds of movies existed, and I had probably heard the name Dolemite as a teenager, but didn't see the actual film until college.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know when I became aware of the fact that it was a film and that, yeah, I don't even, I'm positive I've never even heard my parents utter the name Dolemite ever. Mm. I know that they know about it, but I don't know. In fact, the other day, like I was talking with my dad and my dad was recommending all these movies after I was talking about, I was like, how did you never talk to me about these? Like you never brought these up, you know, right. Like, and I don't know if he was just like, oh, she's a kid. Like, I don't want to expose her to that, or just genuinely like, I don't want to force my preferences on her. Like, right. I don't know. Like I'm listening to you and like so many other people talk about their experience with, I guess, music and movies with their parents. And it seems like a lot of that is shaped by like kind of how their parents like what their parents expose them to. My parents were really hands off in that regard, and I'm really upset about it. I'm
sorry. My parents were overly hands on in that like we weren't allowed to listen to a bunch of stuff except disco very loud in the house all the time. Now I didn't know the story behind Dolemite until just a couple years ago. Okay. So like when I had seen it initially, I just kind of thought it was one of the many blaxploitation films at the time, a lot of which are referenced in Dolemite Is My Name. Mm-hmm. And so I had no idea that he was a stand-up comic and there had been records before that. Yeah. I didn't know that whole section until just a couple years ago. Yeah. Which I find to be, for me, it makes Dolemite as a movie so much more fascinating.
Absolutely.
And like I already consider it's like real Black Dynamite, which sounds terrible, but it is. And especially now knowing that it was intentionally funny makes me feel better about it.
So I'm wondering, like, because you saw it when you were in college, have you seen it again since?
I saw it recently when probably about 4 months ago when when like Dolemite Is My Name was kind of getting a lot of steam kind of after the Oscars. I guess it would have been more than 4 months ago. Time is relative. And I wasn't sure if you were going to be able to watch both. I was like, so I did go back and watch Dolemite Is My Name again, just because I love it. And so it had probably been about 6 months since I'd seen it. But like this year I watched it, and knowing it's a comedy. Now, granted, the first time I saw it, there are scenes in that movie that are undeniably done for comedic effect. Mm-hmm. You know, But there are a bunch of scenes in that movie where you're like, I don't know if this is supposed to be funny. So the first time I saw it, I was like, either this is bad or it's brilliant. And I don't really know where it falls, but I'm here for it either way. And then rewatching it now, I had actually a lot more fun watching it, knowing that it was intentionally done as a comedy. At that point, then it was hilarious to me.
Okay.
So
for me watching it, okay, let me go. I'm just going to say up top, the sex scenes were very difficult for me because he does have the body and hair shape of my father.
Oh God. Oh, I've never had to experience that in a film, and I hope that I never do. Oh, that's horrifying. I didn't even think about that.
This is not right.
Well, and that was a complaint when they were making the movie, like as we hear about in Dolemite Is My Name, but also like kind of obviously at the time we're like, he's not your typical leading man, and so they're, it's my favorite is when he's like leaning out of the sheets like, bitch, are you for real? I love that. This is so insane. I was glad they included it in both films. But no, keep going. Keep going about your family trauma.
Whew. So that was rough. I will say I did notice something interesting because there was a couple of scenes that they recreated, and that was one of the one you just referenced that they covered in Dolemite Is My Name, that I believe in the Tubi version, like I somehow it was cut out.
Really?
Because I was like, I would have remembered this. This is very hilarious.
Yes.
I don't remember that scene. And so
So when I saw it in college, I actually saw a print of it. So like on 35 millimeter.
Oh, wow.
And which oddly enough, some of the films that have survived a little bit better are some of those blaxploitation films because they were shown in grindhouse cinemas. So people preserved the film stock. And they haven't been like converted to Criterion Collection yet. Get on it. So I saw it that way originally. Now the thing with these types of movies at the time, our current rating system was not in place. And so the ratings of movies and the cuts of movies, and a lot of times were predicated based on what could show where. So a lot of times you'll have like different cuts for the UK and different cuts for the US because some things were allowed there and some things weren't. Oddly enough, cuts from the UK at the time tend to have more of the sex scenes, and cuts from the US tend to have more of the violence because culturally in the UK, the sex scenes were more acceptable, but the violence was not. And in America, the sex scenes were less acceptable, but you could shoot anybody. And so sometimes depending on the cut that survived or got uploaded, you may lose some of those bits. Now, when I watched it about 6 months ago, I found a cut on YouTube is how I did it.
Okay.
So I must have had the cut that still had it. But like it's tricky with movies from that era because you really like The Wicker Man is another one famously that some cuts included some things, some cuts included other things. And for a while, that movie I believe was temporarily banned in the UK. Like there's whole, our rating system could have its own podcast. But
that's crazy.
That is unusual that it was not in that cut. Interesting.
And I don't think also the one where the room is shaking, where he's like with the white girl,
which is so hilarious.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's not right. Like if there's a scene that we needed, it's that one.
Girl. Well, I also didn't know up until Dolemite Is My Name came out that it was filmed at the Dunbar Hotel and that they basically lived there to film it.
That was
I like finding that out made me kind of in a weird way treasure the movie even more because I'm like, that's such a significant place for Black entertainment, but also it enabled this fever dream of a movie to be, And I find this movie and its existence to be triumphant.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that people know the story now, because I feel like it colors the film differently. And even though it's not what we would expect from a successful movie, I think it has a lot to say about representation at the time. Almost everyone in that movie is not the norm at the time. I loved, Queen Bee basically saying, like, thank you for putting me in a movie because I'd never seen someone like myself up there. Right, and I was like, important to this day.
Yeah. I mean, also, we'll get into Dolemite Is My Name, but there's so there's another thing about this movie. I mean, definitely, it was nice watching this on the heels of Black Dynamite. Yeah, just to see, like, even, I mean, they reference, like, Nixon is a very present, and then the karate school, like, that was hilarious.
The karate school, the fact that he has an all-girl karate team, like, it's really funny to see a lot of these things that Black Dynamite has as an homage, and to see the original.
Absolutely. Yeah. The acting, like, if you're gonna watch this movie, just be ready. It's you know what? They deliver them lines. Okay.
I love the review that just said every line is screamed. And I was just like, yes. Yes, it is.
Well, honestly, one of my favorite lines that I literally laughed out loud is when he says, "Another frame up. It was, and I'm honestly, like, I'm saying it faster than it was delivered. It literally was like a full pregnant pause before the came in.
I think one of my favorite things is it doesn't matter what line he's saying, he's always glaring.
Yes, or looking half asleep. There's some times where I'm like, is he looking at the camera or
not? Well, and this sounds terrible. I find him to be much more attractive than Eddie Murphy. Like, I feel like Michael Jai White looks more like him than Eddie Murphy does. And I feel like in some scenes, Eddie Murphy does a great job of kind of like imitating the way that he can talk and whatever. But there is something about, he has like his own aura where he's in one movie and maybe it's the same one as everyone else, but you cannot guarantee that scene to scene. And I think what we're seeing is just the determination of, like, I'm gonna do this. This is my movie. You're all just kind of here in it. And excitement, but also like struggling, because Rudy Ray Moore was not an actor, but he pushed through it. And so it is bad. It is a slog at points. It does have pacing problems. But I find it really fun.
Yeah. And early on when he gets out of jail and like the white girl throws him the cotton drawers. And then like they're all making out in the limo, and then once they get to the scene where they're being tailed, she's gone.
Completely gone. Not in the car anymore, and there's no indication she was ever in the car except that his shirt is unbuttoned. And he does the same hand motions, and they had Eddie Murphy do it, and it looks kind of it looks like one of the clumps when Eddie Murphy does it, where he's like waving his hands like drive. But then when you see the real one and you're like, he really kind of does that. And it's the most unnatural hand motions where you're like, a gangster would never do this. And it's one of many peeks into this movie where you really understand that you're like, A, he's not an actor, and B, he's not a gangster. Like, this is all put on. Like the one where he's trying to karate fight and put the guy in the trunk.
Yes.
That's one of my favorite, where he just kind of like dumps him over. Kind of. I don't know how much experience you have watching Star Trek.
Very little. Well,
very
yeah,
okay. So in Star Trek, the original series, there's a fight between Captain Kirk and an alien called the Gorn, and it is hands down one of the worst fights to ever be on television. It's like slow motion throwing styrofoam rocks at each other, like so clearly not at all going to injure Captain Kirk. And it's famous for being that bad. And that's what that scene reminds me of. Him just like, yeah, like dumping people into the trunk.
Also, that outfit. I mean, the beanie and shirt
crocheted from head to toe, honey.
I would also like to point out that the preacher had 3 accents.
Yes.
One when he's talking to black people, one when he's talking to black people in front of white people, and then one when he's talking to Dolemite.
Yes. Absolutely.
And honestly, that tracks. Like literally that is my experience of life and black people. Like he code switch. That's what I'm gonna call it.
One of my favorite Key and Peele sketches kind of illustrates that perfectly, where they're standing on the corner, or they're walking down the sidewalk to a corner, and they're both on the phone, and they stand at the corner, and then they change their voices an octave to be like, yeah, I'll be there, like to sound tough. Mm-hmm. And then they go their separate ways. The light changes and they move, and you hear each of them on the phone be like, oh my God, I almost got mugged right now, to each other. Like they were both pretending for the benefit of the other person. And the preacher reminds me of that, of just kind of like I don't want to get my ass kicked or lightly dumped into a trunk, so I'm going to adjust my behavior.
I would say the other thing that I was noticing too in this movie is, I will say the one person I was like, this seems like a legit actor, was, I think he was like Sergeant Blakely. He ended up being in the FBI.
Well, he reminds me of O'Leary in Black Dynamite, but a better actor.
Yeah.
Like he does a better job, but it's still written so crazy.
Well, he wrote it.
Yes.
He's also, I was like, oh, he's the writer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who was very invested in it being real movie. He didn't necessarily want it to be a comedy,
right?
Which I think is a really interesting note, because as someone who is a comedian and has written comedic scripts, the idea that you would have one person writing a serious drama and then another person come along and be like, put butter on hot toast, and that would be your movie, explains so much of why I feel like that's where you get a lot of the like giving smack to the kids. Like that's where you get those sections of like him trying to write about real things happening in the community and real actionable items. But then you've got the other side of just like, but also add kung fu and explosions. Yes. And that's how you get such a weird melting pot of a movie that unfortunately ends up being more entertaining than informative. But at the same time, is also weirdly informative.
Yeah.
Which I was glad they kept that for Black Dynamite, where it's kind of the same.
Yeah. And I was actually just talking about this with another comedy writer, because I had like, it was kind of the opposite experience, where they brought me in for comedy, but they kept taking the comedy out.
Oh,
like it's that thing that happens a lot, where they're like, we want a comedian, but then they don't actually know what's funny.
Yes.
Oh, and they realize, I mean, maybe too late, like, oh, what we wanted was something that was just gonna just be kind of basic and straightforward.
Yeah. I for a while did corporate training videos. I would like write I would punch up corporate training videos.
Yeah.
And almost always I would punch it up so that we had a version that was hilarious. And then we would turn it in and they would cut the hilarious stuff and then pitch replacements. So like it would be like, what if the punchline was golf? And I was like,
oh my God
dang, why don't you stick to surgery, doctor? Like, what do you let me handle the jokes? And they never ever do. But yeah, this is the opposite where all the jokes stayed in and sometimes the plot got taken out.
And speaking of jokes, so now, and we can start getting into Dolemite as my name too at this point, but like so when he like is met by a bunch of dudes like on a street one day and they're like, oh, you know, like spit some stuff for us, man, or like he's like, oh, you'll see me, and like I guess at that point I really was like, wait, what is his job? Yeah. And that's why I would say, like, I guess the other movie is informative to know that, like, I don't know in this movie if he's supposed to be a comedian, but he does do what he does in his stand-up, which is kind of this like rhyming old Afro folklore telling type thing.
He's bullhorn. So like it's that same like da 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 da, and it's the same rhythm almost every time, so that it is almost musical. But like I think a lot of that was because and again, not knowing this the first time I saw the movie versus knowing it and watching the movie again, that was clearly an appeal to the people who liked him as a comedian.
Right. And I was completely lost. The first time I heard him do it with all those guys on the street, and every time they would laugh, I was like, oh, it was jarring because I was like, what am I missing? Like, what is so, like, I was like, legit, I was like, did they make them laugh because that's what was supposed to happen per the script? Or is this genuinely funny to people?
And at the time, it was genuinely funny to people.
It was genuinely funny. And I was like, oh, like, truly, the other movie helped me understand what was happening. Because I was, like, so lost. Even when he did the bigger performance. I love that his club is called Total Experience.
Yes.
It's such a Black name for a club.
Well, like, my favorite is the club is Total Experience. And then in real life, their like group of comedians, like, you know how comedians will form like a posse and then give themselves a name. Their posse name was Comedian International. I was just like, is this an airline? What are you doing? But then when they start making films, it's Generation International. I was like, you could not get more vague if you tried.
So, but yeah, even when he does that performance, I was still like, wait, what is happening? Yeah. And also every time they cut to the audience, like at least during the dances and the singing before him, they could not have been less impressed. Yeah. And I was like, did they mean to do it that way, or this is just how they show emotion? Like, I don't know.
I think it's because the bulk of the extras in the movie and the bulk of the people that were in that audience were his friends and the other performers in the movie. Yeah. Just dressed up differently. So they're just tired. And there's a shot in Dolemite Is My Name where they're kind of like panning over, and it does show his like main four friends, the guy who did the score, the guy who did all the costumes, and the producer, or essentially the line producer, the guy who handles the money, all seated at a table together as audience in the scene. Right. So I suspect that was probably the case, and they'd probably been up till God knows how long, sleeping in a crazy hotel that had no running water and only occasionally had electricity.
Yeah, I didn't even think about where they all went to the restroom. Like, God, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, well let's start talking about Dolemite Is My Name.
Let's do it.
Which my main takeaway from this movie is that I am Dolemite.
Yeah. That's why. Yeah. That's why I wanted you to watch this. I was like, it's gonna be weird when Kristal realizes that someone else has been her in the past.
I was crying so much during this movie because, yeah, I mean, I was just like, what the fuck? Like,
I'm gonna say it's not a bad,
all this. Like,
yeah, and I'm gonna say it's not a bad thing to be Dolemite. Like, I know that sounds insane to be like, I'm Dolemite, but I think that is the only way sometimes that people succeed. And I think one of the most admirable things about him in ostensibly real life, from what we know, and the way he's portrayed in this film, is that he believes in himself no matter what. Like, no matter what anyone else says, he is like, I can do it. I have it within me to make this happen. And I don't care if you don't believe in me. I believe in me, and I'm going to bet on myself.
Mm-hmm. And
I love it. I feel like more people should aspire to that, but maybe not all people, because I've seen American Idol.
Well, yeah, one thing this movie did was just give me the, like, I don't know, all the vibes of like being on the stage again, because especially early on when he's getting the light from the club
he's
owner,
running the light. Yeah.
I'm like, oh. But yeah, I guess for people who are listening to the podcast, kind of the way I identified and to kind of explain that. So like about I guess a little over a year ago now, I like took out a personal loan. Like I invested heavily in like personal projects. I made a music video, and I did things that I felt like in the same way, like Dolemite is like betting on himself, I guess, like, you know, trying to get to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I did. And now I'm in this place where I'm still, you know, having to work a full-time job, and like I haven't yet seen the lines around the block for people to, you know, I'm not on this movie is the movie that you get at the end of, I guess, when the success.
Yeah.
And I'm still not there yet. So I still feel like, yeah, so it was really emotional for me in a good way. And also it reminds me of my main advice to a lot of people, which is stop going to seminars where you listen to people who have created nothing tell you what you should be doing.
Yes. Thank you. The thing that I love about this movie too is it doesn't sugarcoat it. You know, it shows him having to grind and tour and be poor and borrow money and record this album in his living room. Like, it shows that scrappiness, but it also shows that, you know, just because you bet on yourself, it doesn't suddenly make things easy. You know, like it shows that, and I think that's why the end feels so great, is because it's this hard journey for him to get there, where he's losing sleep. He gives up his house to live in a hotel with no running water to make the movie he dreams about, because he thinks that's what he needs. And in the end, it pays off, but it takes years. And so it is this, it does feel good to have him do it. And at the end be like, I won because I believed in myself. You know, because that is truly the message of this movie, is like, it's not going to be easy, but if you believe in yourself, you know, you can make a movie with a women karate team.
I will say one thing about this movie when he's doing his stand-up, it was the first time I laughed
Yes.
at it, and maybe it's because I could hear it. I don't know, but the line that I laughed at was, "Oh yeah, I sucked an earthworm's dick."
Oh yeah, got so low I suck an earthworm's dick. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's funny. I was triggered when he did tell the producer that he came up with a whole new set, and it was one day later.
Oh, girl. I feel like that's something that if you've never done stand-up, if you've never hosted a show or produced a show, that you have this idea of like, yeah, what's wrong? He made a new set. It's going to be great. No.
Please explain why that is triggering.
Okay, so there are different types of comedians. Some of them write ahead of time and some of them write on stage. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you that one is better than the other because different people have different processes. It's all the road to the same place. But for the people who write on stage, that means that when you get on stage in front of people, sometimes you're still figuring it out and it might not be funny and it desperately might not work. Mm-hmm. And similarly for the people who write ahead of time, you've never tried it in front of people. So you might have punchlines figured out and it still might not work. Mm-hmm. And so there's this feeling of, if this is the first time you're trying it, if this is a day later, you have not had the chance to test any of this. And the odds of you nailing it that first time are, I would say you have a 20% chance of success. 80% of the time you're going to fail. 20% of the time you nail it enough to then keep working on it later. Mm-hmm. I have only had one or two times where I've told a joke for the first time and had it totally crush. Mm-hmm. Usually, if I tell a joke for the first time and it does well, I'm then going to keep refining that joke until it consistently crushes. Mm-hmm. But for paying customers,
yeah,
it's not a good idea.
Absolutely, yeah. So that there was a couple of moments where I was like, wow, like it just was a different world too, though, that back then.
People got paid to perform.
Yes, people got paid to perform. Fedco sold gin. Have you ever been to a Fedco? Have you ever?
No, I've never.
Do you know what it is? Or
no,
kind of
that's a joke that kind of went over my head completely.
My God, I fell out. So Fedco, I don't know the full history about Fedco, but what Fedco was, it was before Sam's Club and Costco.
Okay.
So it was like a membership grocery store. You were a member of this grocery store. You got like coupons specific to your membership and like what you bought and stuff. And I actually don't remember what Fedco stands for. I'm not going to look it up, but I remember going to Fedco as a kid and like it kind of had everything. It was like a Walmart, or, you know, it had groceries, it had clothes, it had like a jewelry
and
department,
gin, apparently.
and gin.
Well, and now that you kind of tell me what it is, now that joke makes a little more sense, because not all Walmarts sell alcohol. Like, it depends on where you are, that sometimes those types of stores don't sell booze. Costco is like a notable exception.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And oh man, I was really taken back when he was producing the show in a house.
Yep.
Oh, like I miss it. I miss that so much. I just love that feeling and the closeness, and like, I mean, honestly, like producing, if I had a space to produce a comedy show in my own place again, like I totally would still do that. I mean, that's where I would record an album, because it's just such a cool thing to be that close to people. Like, well, if we ever are able to be that close to people again, you know?
Yeah. I feel like that's the only time my comptroller bit ever works is at house shows, where I did it at your show and it like fucking crushed, and then I never got it to work again. Where I just joke about like, it only works around election season too, of just like, what is a comptroller? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh,
yeah, there's something about
house shows.
Yeah, house shows. But I think that's the moment where I was like, I literally wrote down, I am Dolemite. I've produced shows in my house. I've sung, I've done dancing before. Like, I am an entrepreneur. I've like made a video. Like, yeah, it's yeah.
I did sit there and think, what would it take to record an album in my house? And I was just like taking stock of all the sound equipment I currently have.
Dude.
And I was like, I bet we could do that.
Yeah. Why not? You know, like,
I mean, pandemic. But other than that, why not?
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, that'd be really fun.
And also just like, when have we ever seen a movie, or I don't know, like, I don't even know too many people's like story where they legit had a man, like a woman in comedy, have a man just pick them and yes. You know what I mean? Like, because he has this moment with Lady Reed, right?
Yeah, I like, love their relationship.
Stand-up. Yeah, I started to tear up because I was like,
they make me cry the whole movie. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's just it's so precious, and like, and I don't want to use the word pure, but it doesn't feel tainted by weird like other stuff that you hear constantly happening in comedy, you know?
Yeah, well, I feel like the thing that I love about her in this movie and her role in this film is at no point is she sexualized in the context of their relationship. Mm-hmm. That never enters into it. He willingly admits she is talented, actively tries to help her, and then they remain friends for years with him respecting her as a comedic peer. And yes, and
word.
Yes, and she is part of their crew. The other people in their crew also respect her as a peer. And I was like, this is so refreshing. And the fact that this story is 40 plus years old makes me so sad, because why is this not currently and it's not that nobody does this, but it's rare, you know, like there are a handful of national touring headliners that do invest in female comics, and they're wonderful, but there are infinitely more that have tried to use that relationship for sex or just don't invest in female comics at all. So to see a relationship where it's not sexual, she has no obligation to romantically work with him at all. He is just invested in her as a performer, and they have a fulfilling, respectful friendship. And I love it. I love it so much.
It's so great. It's so refreshing. I really wish more like things could like that. I mean, again, like you said, it is happening, but I just wish it was happening to such a greater degree, because
and more publicly.
Because unlike a lot of other industries, it's like comedy is the one where you know, being in contact with a bigger comedian really could change your life. Like, for example, like I think in acting, like, just because you know another big actor doesn't mean that you're going to get a part.
Right.
But like being considered as funny to another big comedian could change your career. Like,
right.
To be put on the road once by them, to have that as a credit once by them, you know, like if you're an actor, like, you know, John Hamm, you can't put that shit on a resume, you know?
Right.
So it just like, we're so dependent on these other comedians who have like they're, you know, they've made it, or they've made it bigger than us. We're so dependent on them in a lot of ways to kind of like make it to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just so cool that he does this for a woman, and a non-traditional, I guess, like,
yeah, she's not conventionally attractive is what I would say. I think she's beautiful, but by the standards of the time and by the standards of today, she, you know, without that comedy act, and without him putting her in a movie, she would have never been in a movie. Just realistically. That doesn't mean she's not talented, but she would have never been there. You know? And I feel like that's notable too, where he made an effort to support and bring up his friends around him, you know, and actually further artists that he had worked with, and make an attempt to help them as he helped himself. But he also didn't listen when people were like, you don't look the way we expect, or they don't look the way we expect. And he was like, fuck that. That's who we are. And I love that.
Also, if there's one thing that I've learned from this movie is that I need to see Blackenstein. What the
Yeah, Blackenstein. Blackula was first. We do still need to watch Blackula. I feel like for October, we should watch, first of all, Bua Medea Halloween. But then also we should watch actual Blackula and then Blackenstein if we can get our hands on it. I thought for a hot second, and let me double check, I thought Blackenstein was a joke one that they put in.
Oh, okay.
But then no, 1973, it is a very real movie.
All the movies that they were mentioning, I was just like,
they're all
damn,
real,
that happened. Yeah, like like when the director, now we need to talk about the director, so the director is played by, it's Wesley Snipes, right?
Yeah, Blade directed.
Yes, Blade. So Wesley Snipes plays the guy, D'Urville. He's an actor, but they let him also direct in order to get him to be in the movie.
And his main claim to fame at the time, he'd been in a couple blaxploitation movies, but his biggest credit was being in Rosemary's Baby.
Right. And he had nerve to be like, I have an agent. I'm like, really? One of your movies was Boss Nigger, and you want to talk about having an agent? Okay.
Oh, I didn't realize that he had been in Boss N-Word.
Yes, he was. And like another movie with this like similar title.
Well, here's the thing. They all had those titles because they're not meant for white people. But like, they are art that is not created for white consumption. And I feel like that's something that sometimes when people criticize it, I'm like, you realize that this is not meant for white people.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
And that's okay. But that's one of, that's a notable time in history where people actively created art that was not designed for white people. Like, that's a good thing. Not saying it couldn't be better, but I'm just saying, that's what this was, and maybe we should continue to make some stuff like that.
Yeah, I really love that line that he says at one point where he says, every city in America has those same five blocks.
Yes.
Because they tell him, like, you don't make a movie for the 5 blocks that you know. And he's like, well, every city in America has those same 5 blocks and they'll watch it.
Yep. And he's right. He's fucking right. He's right. I also love, they highlight at the end of, or towards the end of the movie, when they're going to finally release it, they talk about specifically the theaters that they're going to be releasing it in. And he calls them the grand picture halls. And he's doing that in a way to make them sound nice. Because the reality was, at that time, movie theaters had started to franchise and become conglomerates. And so the old movie theaters that were an actual theater were not as popular, and they were often very run down, and those become a lot of the grindhouse cinemas. So he's painting it as it's like this big thing. But what he's actually saying is, like, we're showing this in rundown theaters, but we sell out. And that's what happens. That's how this movie gains traction and makes $10 million that year, which at the time was huge.
Yeah. I thought that was dope. But it was truly watching Wesley Snipes' portrayal of this guy that I was just like, oh, so there were multiple people along the way and on the set who were like, this doesn't make sense.
100%.
And at the end of the day, I'm glad he didn't fully listen, but it still was like, oh, okay, like.
Yeah. I think I feel about it similarly to The Room. I don't know if you've seen The Room or seen The Disaster Artist.
No.
It's the white version of this, and but the movie is not as good. And so The Room is made by a crazy person who similarly was like, no one's going to cast me. I'm going to make my own movie. I'm going to write it. It makes so much less sense. It's not nearly as fun of a movie. And along the way, a lot of people were like, this is a bad idea, and then still did it. And that's how that movie got made and made millions of dollars, because it was a spectacle of terribleness. I feel like Dolemite still succeeds as a movie. Like it's bad and it's weird, but it's still watchable. You know, much like Black Dynamite, where you're like, this is insane, but I'm gonna watch the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I loved when I loved Titus in this movie.
Titus Burgess is amazing always.
His reactions to things, I was like, that's what I need. Like I need like Dolemite the movie, but like with Titus's reactions along the way. Like, and that's 100% what you get with Dolemite Is My Name.
my favorite is whenever he tells someone what their job is, because people have multiple jobs. Yeah. And so he's like, well, you're the caterer today.
Oh yeah. So feed them honkies. That's what she does.
I will say, so I finished out film school at UCLA, and they are very proud to have helped Dolemite come to be.
Wow. That's it. That's great. Good for them.
And I know they had a poster of it in the film school for a while, because they were like, yeah, technically we made this.
I was, of course, reminded of Hollywood Shuffle as well, when they are sitting in the theater watching that white movie, and they're like, they ain't got no titties, no funny, no kung fu.
Yes. Every time Rudy Ray Moore in Dolemite Is My Name lists off the things that he thinks need to be in a good movie, I was like, same. Hard same. Where he's like, there's no kung fu, there's no explosions, there's no gangsters, there's no naked ladies, and I'm just like, sign me up. These movies sound great. I agree. I got asked the other day why I don't like rom-coms, and I was like, there's no explosions.
Oh, that's true. So okay, let's give our rating. I'm gonna rate. I was at first gonna give my rating for Dolemite, and then my rating for Dolemite Is My Name. But I feel like, to me, they go together.
Yes.
And the way I feel about the original is definitely colored by now what I know. And it feels appropriate. And I also feel like I feel a lot in the same way as like the transition of like how people see Black hair in America, right? Like it's the same way that like I don't think there's anything wrong with getting extensions and weaves, and I think that can look just as beautiful. And I prefer to wear my hair naturally, and I think it's not right to like put one above the other. But I do this thing in my mind with art. I kind of do the same thing, and I'm trying to like level that, like be critical, but also like not elitist.
There's no wrong way to be Black.
Right. And so I'll say that when I say all that to say I would give Dolemite Is My Name this for sure 5 out of 5 hair picks.
Yeah, agreed.
And loved it from top to bottom. Like all the performances and reenactments were amazing.
It's
honestly
great.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy kills it. Wesley Snipes kills it. I loved the meta feeling of like watching Eddie Murphy, a famous stand-up comedian, and Lunel, also famous stand-up comedian, talking about Bill Cosby.
Yes.
But as different people.
Yes. Well, and be like, he's kind. He's the family man.
Yeah.
Because this is pre-Cosby Show. This is back when he was just doing those albums.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of the like pinnacle of success. If you wanted to look at like being a Black comedian with an album, there's that, and then there's Richard Pryor. And people had very strong opinions either way. Or Red Fox, because they do play Red Fox in the movie. But there's very much this like, are you going to go dirty? Or are you going to be a family man like Bill Cosby? And I think I love the scene where Lunel finally hears the album and realizes that it's just filthy. And then he just hands her money and she's like, never mind. Which I find hilarious because Lunel is filthy.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's why it was so meta. I was like, Lunel is nasty. Like,
I love it. I love it. She's hilarious.
I love that moment. Yeah.
That was very, very funny. It's a nice Easter egg if you are familiar with Lunel's work. I love it.
And I'm going to give Dolemite, the original Dolemite, I'm going to give that 4 out of 5 hair picks. I'm only 4 out of 5 because it really is knowing what I know about him in this movie that makes it for me. It's not particularly my taste, and that's not, to take away from that being what other people like. But I just love that he pushed forward and like got this movie made. And it is enjoyable to watch. Can I watch this a bunch of times? Not really, but like I could watch scenes from it like multiple times.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it's that movie where you introduce it to somebody so that you can watch it and laugh together, and then you don't watch it again for years until you introduce it to somebody else.
Right.
Much like Black Dynamite in that way.
Yeah.
Although I would say Black Dynamite's a little more rewatchable.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. In fact, I'm probably going to rewatch it tonight.
Did you finally get a chance to rewatch it with your boyfriend?
That's what I want. So he wasn't in the mood the other day. So hopefully he'll be in the mood tonight because I know he's going to love it. And I can't wait to like find all the things that I missed the first time around. And also just like get it more, at this point, having watched, Dolemite and watch, other things. I feel like I'm going to get it even more than I would the first time.
And that's another, like, Michael Jai White fought to get that movie made the same way Rudy Ray Moore fought to get his movie made, which I think is such an interesting parallel between the two. And that's why I'm glad that we watched all of these kind of all together over the last couple weeks, because I feel like it all goes together, like Hollywood Shuffle, Black Dynamite, Dolemite is my name. It paints a greater narrative of the Black experience in Hollywood that we don't always get to hear about because they don't make fancy Oscar drama movies about it,
That's so true. They really should. And I think it's really good for people to see the struggle that it takes to make any piece of art, whether you consider it worthy of your time or not. And especially what it takes to make it if like you're also Black in America. Like I think sometimes you have an idea and like there's so many people around you who they 100% believe like this idea is great, and it's like, why hasn't it already been made yet? And then it's like, oh, well, it's because, the people that have the money and the power and the influence, like they don't believe in it, you know? And that's kind of the similar story. I mean, even truly with this podcast, like there have been, multiple like attempts to like, prove prior to the podcast, like launching that this is something that people would like and it would be good. Right. And yet you still have a lot of people who have doors that they could open, not do that. Yeah. So shout out to the ones that did, y'all some real ones. Real people. Yeah. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate people who've been sharing the podcast and listening, and, big ups to Sweden.
Yes. Horgy Borgy Borg. Yes.
Australia, what up?
Good day. How them giant spiders going?
Canada, y'all in there too?
Oh, poutine. I could taste it right now.
So Paige, what is your rating for these two movies?
I would agree with you. Dolemite Is My Name is a 5 out of 5 for me. I love it top to bottom. There was awards talk about Eddie Murphy this past award season, and he didn't get a lot of them, and it really bummed me out because I felt like he deserved it for this movie. Yeah. But I would agree with you on the original Dolemite as well, only because if you don't know that it's a joke, then it does not translate. And I feel like Black Dynamite makes it a little more obvious that we're joking. And so it's a little more successful in that regard. But once you know that they're joking, it's a lot of fun. So I'm definitely going to keep it in like the 4 to 4.5 hairpick range.
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys watch this movie, comment on their feed, message us, let us know what you thought of it. At just in the same vein as Black Dynamite, there are some titties in this.
There's a lot of titties.
There's some titties in this movie. So that you have that to look forward to. Let us know what you think.
Did you want to do a shout out for Black Noir?
Oh,
speaking of opening those entertainment doors.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Please check out the Kickstarter that I am working on. I'm part of a team that's putting together a bunch of noir stories, all written by Black comic book writers, and they're going to it's going to be a graphic novel. So there's going to be art along with it, and the art will also be done by Black artists as well. Even the letterer is going to be Black.
Nice.
So yeah, it's going to be a really dope project once it's all completed. We just need to get there. And so if you are interested in comics, if you love comics, if you love the genre of noir, if you just love Black people and supporting Black projects, please share this with as many people as you can. We are trying to raise enough money so that we can pay everybody. We're paying everybody, a fair market rate for what they're contributing to the project. So please go on Kickstarter, find Noir is the New Black, and support the Kickstarter.
Yay!
Yay! And yeah, thanks so much for listening, you guys. We will be Black next time.